Africa is turning its back on the United States. And at first, I thought the United States were angry. But what I've realized is that the United States are scared. In this video, I'm going to talk about a specific example of this that has just happened now and break down the contagious dynamics that is set to see a new paradigm in international trade on the continent of Africa. Thank you so much for clicking and choosing to watch this video today. If you don't know me, my name is TJ. I'm Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So the specific example that is breaking news right now is Kenya. So let's take a look at the article that explains what's going on. Kenya's plan to switch debt payments to China from US dollars to yuan is a win-win. The move could set a new precedent, reducing Nairobi's reliance on US currency while meeting Beijing's goal for increased trade deals in yuan. Kenya's plan to convert its US dollars-dominated Chinese debt to yuan is a win-win, as it is expected to reduce interest payments for the African nation while advancing China's goal of increasing the global use of its currency, according to analysts. The deal would be precedent-setting and could establish a new rulebook for future debt restructuring and possibly cut reliance on the US dollar. In late August, Kenya's Treasury announced that talks with the Export-Import Bank of China were at an advanced stage to extend maturities and swap dollar-denominated debt into yuan to ease pressure on its foreign reserves. If successful, it would see interest rates on the loans secured for the standard gauge railway SGR half from 6.37% under the existing dollar-denominated loan terms. The East African nation had 2014 and 2015 secured two loans worth about 5 billion, that's 35 billion yuan, to build a 480-kilometer long standard gauge railway line connecting the port city of Mombasa with the capital city of Nairobi, and a 120-kilometer extension to Naivasha in Central Rift Valley. According to Kenyan Treasury Minister John Mbadi, the interest rate on the loans would drop more than 6% in US dollars to about 3% in yuan due to the difference between the secured overnight financial rate, 4.6%, and yuan rates. The deal is expected to reduce the $1 billion US Kenya spends annually on servicing its debt in China, creating greater flexibility within its national budget. So I did some maths on this, and depending on the length of the term, there could be some fluctuation. I don't know the length of the term of the loan, but you're talking about a saving of around $1 billion. Could be more if the term is a bit longer. And for a $5 billion loan, that's a lot of saving. Not only could that money be allocated to other projects, but the return that Kenya is going to see a GDP increase because of that railway line. Basically, the incentive to do this is an absolute no-brainer. One of the biggest problems that Africa has is that debts are denominated in currencies they don't control. African countries generally find it hard to continuously hold dollars. Whatever they produce in their country has to be used to purchase and hold dollars. And because they don't have control of the dollar printing press, because of market dynamics across the globe, it becomes ever more expensive to exchange goods for dollars. You need more stuff to buy those dollars, to hold those dollars. And you need the dollars because the dollars is what services your debt, your IMF loans, and in this case, the loan for the railway. But now they don't need to do that, right? They hold Chinese money, and the Chinese money has less debt attached to it off rip. Nairobi in recent past came under severe financial pressure, especially following the cancellation of the 2024 finance bill, which stalled plans to introduce new taxes after widespread protests. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, classified Kenya at a high risk of debt distress and suspended the final review of its program with the country, a move that left the government without access to final loan disbursement of nearly 850 million. That 850, that's interesting because that's about the amount, a little bit more maybe, that Kenya is due to save from this deal. Sub-Saharan Africa geonomic analyst Ali Khan Satchu said the debt swap would be a win-win for both Kenya and China. For Kenya, Satchu said, it diversifies the borrowing currency basket side of the balance sheet. He said for China, it increased the penetration of the yuan in the global marketplace and its measured manner. You see, China are trying to circumvent the dollar as well. They want to do trade in their own currency, the currency they print, the currency they create interest rates for, and they want to fund their own bank outside of the IMF and these other established institutions that lets the global south trade without the dollar in their own currencies. According to Mark Bouland, the senior credit research analyst at Red Intelligent, it remains to be seen if the Kenyan government request to extend the repayment of Chinese loans will be more successful than previous efforts. Bouland said Kenya's financing needs in the 25-26 fiscal year had risen due to delays in IMF and World Bank funds, prompting the government to redirect the proceeds from the 1.5 billion Eurobond sale in February from their last planned use of prepaying syndicated loans arranged by Trade and Development Bank, currently closing at 12.13% to finance the budget deficit. Don't worry about all of these details and confusing numbers and whatever it's saying. What it means is that the IMF tries to put a squeeze on Kenya. And in this case, Kenya just said, okay, we'll just do this deal over here without you. We don't need you. We don't have to rely on you so heavily. Now, it can't do it right now for its total debt. But in my opinion, this is something like testing the waters, because instead of the IMF and the World Bank becoming the key loaning machine for African countries, China and the BRICS nations can become that. The continued divergence between Shanghai International Rate and LIBOR and other US dollars-centered interest rates makes it attractive for Kenyan governments to shift the SGR loans and other debts owed to Chinese creditors to yuan, Balloon said. David Omojomlo, African economist at Capital Economics and London-based macroeconomic research consultancy, said other heavily China-exposed borrowers like Angola will be watching closely. That is right. Other countries around the world are going to see if this works or not, and they're going to want to have the same deal. And think about it. This loan is linked to a tangible piece of infrastructure that generates money. So instead of worrying so much about can the government afford it or not, they can point to that infrastructure and say, okay, you have to pay us out of that infrastructure, and that infrastructure generates X amount. And so over the course of these years, you can pay us back from the revenues you get from that infrastructure. Not to mention, like I said before, the GDP increase. Personally, I don't see how this fails. The US will be watching too, having warned against deeper Chinese BRICS financial integration, Omojomlo said. Ultimately, though, he said, these liability management exercises did not change Kenya's fundamental challenge. Without IMF support and meaningful fiscal consolidation, the country's debt trajectory remains unstable. Omojomlo added, Kenya may muddle through in the short term, but its ability to service its obligations will remain strained, leaving sovereign default risk elevated. Now, like I said, it doesn't solve all their problems, but it's a testing step. It's something that steps on the toes of what America has its stranglehold on the globe over. This move aligns with China's broader strategy to internationalize its currency and challenge the dominance of the US dollar. It has signed currency swap agreements with countries such as Nigeria and South Africa. Notice Nigeria and South Africa are part of BRICS nations. The continent is also witnessing more yuan-based deals, such as a recent 2.1 billion yuan loan between China Development Bank and the Development Bank of South Africa. Furthermore, both the African Export-Import Bank, Afrimex Bank, and South Africa's Standard Bank have joined the cross-border international payment system, China's alternative to the SWIFT international payment network, to facilitate direct yuan interbank payments in China-Africa trade. And this is something that America holds over countries. They say, if you don't play ball with us financially, we're going to shut you out of the SWIFT system. That's what they've done with Russia, and that's what they've done with North Korea, for example. But now there's an alternative. Like, okay, we'll use another bank. You don't give us favorable deals. You come with a lot of ideology. You come with a lot of sanctions. You come with a lot of rules and stipulations because you still think you have the same leverage you did 20 years ago. You don't.
They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.
Now, to further double click on the idea that the United States are actually worried about this article is key. Kenya faces US threat for praising China's role in New World Order. And I would like to note that this article was put together at the beginning of August. The tension escalated following a state visit to Beijing in April, when President William Ruto secured landmark infrastructure trade deals and publicly praised China's role in what he called a New World Order. This provoked a backlash from the United States, which has launched a review of the ally status. That status, granted in 2024, not long ago, gives Kenya preferential access to a range of military and economic benefits, including US defense contracts and joint training opportunities. It was part of Washington's strategy to counter Chinese and Russian influence in the region. I'm not sure if you remember, about a month or so ago, there was an operation where military gathered in Nairobi, and it was led by the former AFCOM leader, who's now been replaced, General Michael Langley. He did a whole press tour and a media tour after the backlash of the things he said about Burkina Faso. And this military meeting was done with President Ruto and Kenyan military officials, as well as military officials from all over Africa. This is part of this special relationship that Kenya has with the United States, all very friendly, until they visit China. Now the US is leveraging the non-NATO status to express its frustration with Kenya's deepening ties with China, Kenya's largest bilateral leader, which has financed infrastructure projects for railways to highways in the country. US Senator Jim Risch, chairman of the State Foreign Relations Committee, this week proposed an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026 to reassess the status. The review, to be conducted by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio within 90 days, demands detailed breakdown of Kenya's military, political, and financial engagements with China, including its participation in the Belt and Road Initiative and its long-term financial dependence on China. They have launched an investigation. It's going to take 90 days, and they've made a fuss about William Ruto visiting China and saying, this is the New World Order. And what does he do? He gets a brand new loan to restructure away from the US dollar in the midst of that 90 days. That is a massive statement. It is complete defiance. And the United States are running out of things they can do to put the squeeze and manipulate Kenya based off their actions. This will be noticed by every other African country, the position of weakness that the United States is falling to, the position of strength that China is building, and is likely to be very contagious. I, for one, welcome Kenya effectively turning its back on the United States. The United States is linked to the World Bank and IMF, who do predatory loans, who do not have the best interests of the everyday African at heart. Africa less and less needs to acquiesce to that arrogance. China's not perfect, but you can see right here a clear example of how they offer a better deal, and it is a clear sign of the changing times. I'm not a big fan of William Ruto, but in this case, this is the right decision. I would love to know what you guys think out there. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts. But if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for you to write the words Africa's New World Order in the comment section? Just let me know that you watched the video to the end, you support the channel, you like what I'm doing, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching this video today. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.